What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my 2025 SEC football predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. So as you guys know, I did predictions for all the Power 4 teams, giving you record predictions and everything, and also doing it especially here for the SEC. We've gone through every single SEC team, giving you a prediction for that team, and now we're going to show you what the standings could look like based on my official predictions. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to give you my SEC football champion. So that's how the video is going to work here. We're going to do the same thing with the other Power 4 conferences. We'll have the Big 10 tomorrow, then we'll have the Big 12, and then we'll close things out with the ACC. And then we got my playoff predictions coming up very soon as well. As we close things out here for these predictions, as we're really getting close to the start of the 2025 season. So let's jump right in here to the SEC. We'll start from the bottom and work our way to the top. So at the way bottom here, I got Mississippi State. I have this team going 3-9 and then winless in the SEC. Now, I can expect Mississippi State to do much better than that, though. You look at this team, earlier in the season, I feel like this team was going to be the worst team again in the SEC this year. But now I look at them, I think this could be a 5-7, maybe a 6-6 type team. Mississippi State could be a pretty good team this year. They could be a surprise team in the SEC as well. They have a few games where they probably can potentially win. Some of the opponents that they have on the schedule, they could probably have a step back year this year in 2025. So yeah, Mississippi State, I can see them doing a lot better than that 3-9 record. But it is a tough schedule, and plus they got a non-conference game against Arizona State, which they definitely could potentially win because that game is at home this year. So yeah, the Bulldogs definitely could probably do better than that 5-7 record. Let's say they beat Arizona State, and they could probably go on to have a bowl type team this year. But if they don't, it could be a 5-7 year for Mississippi State. I think that's what's going to happen here for the Bulldogs. But yeah, because of the schedule for Mississippi State, that's why I got them going 3-9 and then also winless in the SEC. But they're not the only team that's also going winless here in the SEC according to my predictions. As we go now to the next set of teams, that other team besides Mississippi State is Kentucky. Kentucky is a team that I have a lot of question marks for. You look at both sides of the football, a lot of new faces on this team, and they also have a pretty tough schedule in the SEC, and they also got a non-conference game against Louisville. I also have them losing that game on the road. So yeah, Kentucky is a team that I just have so many question marks about, and as a Kentucky fan myself, I don't want to see Kentucky go this way, but I had to be honest when I'm not a Kentucky fan outside these videos. So Wildcats here at 3-9, winless in the SEC on these standings. Missouri at 5-7, 1-7 in conference play. I know Missouri fans are not going to like this prediction, but I have some concerns about the offense. I really do. New quarterback, obviously, who's going to really step up there, and also who's going to step up at wide receiver because they lost some key players there on the offensive side of the football, especially at that receiving position. Defensively, they could have a top 5 defense, though, in the SEC, and maybe that's what keeps them in, really close games this year. Maybe they're a team that probably loses a lot of close games, and they also have a non-conference game against Kansas out of the Big 12. I do have them winning that game, so that's probably where those that fifth win comes from. The 4 of those games come in the non-conference, and then, of course, the 1 win comes in the SEC. And then we have Vanderbilt also at 5-7, but 2-6 in conference play. Vanderbilt and Missouri both have identical 5-7 records, but I got Vanderbilt winning the head-to-head, so that's how it worked here between these two teams in the tiebreaker, and that also kind of came down to the tiebreaker against Auburn as well, because Auburn and Vanderbilt both have similar 2-6 records, but I did got the Tigers of Auburn beating Vanderbilt in the head-to-head matchup. But for Vanderbilt, they could probably do much better than that 5-7 record. I wouldn't be surprised if this Vanderbilt team did make it back to a bowl game this year. Diego Pavia is back at quarterback. And they're a team that, just was really slept on. A lot of teams feel like they were going to beat up on Vanderbilt last year, and they obviously did not expect to be, very competitive against, those elite teams. I don't think it's going to happen this year, though, for Vanderbilt. They can at least get a couple of wins, but I don't see this team, beating the elite teams in the SEC this year. So yeah, Vanderbilt at 5-7, just missing out on a bowl game in 2025. And I also got them losing a non-conference game to Virginia Tech, and that one's on the road. And then Auburn and Florida both at 6-6. The Tigers here, they have a pretty tough schedule. I can see Auburn and Florida, they're pretty similar teams. They could do much better than that 6-6 record. I wouldn't be surprised if these two teams went probably like 8-4. Or even 9-3. These two teams could potentially be top 25 teams this year. For Auburn, though, they have a tough schedule. They got Georgia and Alabama both at home this year. If they at least, win one of those two games, then they probably go 7-5. So maybe Auburn does go 7-5. They pull off an upset somewhere. It could be against Alabama in the Iron Bowl, or it could be against their rival, in Georgia. So yeah, keep an eye on this Auburn team, and also keep an eye on Florida. This Florida team, they also have a pretty tough schedule. It's not one of the most brutal in the SEC, but it's very close to being like that. I think Mississippi State has the toughest schedule out of these SEC teams. But for Florida, they have Miami in the non-conference. I do have them losing that game, but that's a game they can potentially win. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Florida's at 9-3 this year, and then also 8-4. But because of their schedule and how tough it is, I got this team just going 6-6. And I'm not a Florida hater. I'm not saying they're going to be really bad. I think they can do much better than that. So let's now go to the next set of teams. We got Oklahoma and Arkansas. They are both at 7-5, different conference records. The Sooners at 3-5, and then Arkansas at 4-4. If you look at this Oklahoma team, I feel like they're going to be a lot better this year. You add in John Matier at quarterback, but they also have a tough schedule. Some of these teams in the SEC, Oklahoma, Mississippi State, Florida, Auburn, and Kentucky, and like I said, they have all tough schedules in the SEC. So that's kind of the reason why these predictions are pretty low for these teams. But I can also see Oklahoma doing much better than that 7-5 record. They could probably go 8-4 or 9-3 as well, because I feel like the Sooners are going to be a lot better this year. And this is not a bad team. This is a very talented team. You go back to the Lincoln Riley days, they had some talent on the roster, and it could be even more talented with that defense as well. So yeah, Oklahoma here at 7-5, and then Arkansas. I think this will be a solid team. They'll be right there around that 6, 7, 8 win mark. I don't think Arkansas is going to be really bad this year. And I also think they're just going to be solid. And they also have a non-conference game against Notre Dame. I forgot to mention where Oklahoma's one of their 7 win comes from. They also have a non-conference game against Michigan. So I got them winning all 4 of their non-conference games. But for Arkansas, I have them winning like 3 out of their 4 non-conference games. So yeah, that's kind of the difference here between these two 7-5 teams. And then we got 3 teams here at 5-3 in the next set of teams, but we also have another 4 team at 5-3 as well in the conference. But for South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss, different records. South Carolina and Ole Miss, though, 9-3, and then Texas A&M at 8-4. South Carolina, obviously, a lot of hype around this team. Maybe they can do a little bit better than that, not actually better than that 9-3 record. This is a team that probably could be right there around 8-4 or 7-5. I know they're getting a lot of hype this year, but I don't know if this team is going to be a playoff team or anything like that. They also have a pretty tough non-conference schedule. They got Virginia Tech and Clemson. I got them winning both of those games, though, so that's where pretty much the 9 wins come from. I wouldn't be surprised if they probably lost both of those games, and maybe at least win one of those 2 games. Maybe they beat Virginia Tech but lose to Clemson, but still, I got South Carolina going 9-3 this year, and then Texas A&M. The reason why Texas A&M ended up being ahead of South Carolina is because of the head-to-head. So I got the Aggies beating South Carolina head-to-head matchup. I think Texas A&M also can do a little bit better than that 8-4 record. They could potentially go 9-3 or 10-2, but they have a non-conference game against Notre Dame on the road. So yeah, that's one of their, that's where one of those losses come from. Instead of being 3 losses, it's 4 losses because I had them losing a non-conference game to Notre Dame. And then Ole Miss at 9-3, kind of similar to South Carolina. I really don't think this is a playoff team this year. It could be a step back for them. I think the offense will still be good, but defensively, they lose some key players on that side of the football there. So, yeah, Ole Miss could probably have an 8-4 or 7-5 type year. So, yeah, keep an eye on that if you're an Ole Miss fan. And we go to the final set of teams here in the SEC standings. We got Tennessee also at 9-3 and then 5-3 in the conference. We have 4 teams at 5-3 in SEC play. For Tennessee, I have them winning against Syracuse in the non-conference. That's one of their, that's where one of those 9 wins comes from there in the non-conference. Their 3 losses, though, I have them losing to Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. I think that's pretty respectable of a prediction there for Tennessee. Besides, offensively, we have some question marks at quarterback. Joey Aguilar, how good is he going to be in this system here for Josh Heupel? That'll definitely be a question mark there. Defensively, I think they'll be pretty good. I don't think it's going to be the similar type of defensive line they had last year, but I think it still will be a strength of Tennessee this season. It really does come down to the offense. It really does come down to Joey Aguilar and how good of a quarterback he'll be. And then Alabama, LSU, both at 10-2. I do got Alabama beating LSU in the head-to-head, but still, because of the conference record, you have to put LSU ahead of Alabama here. For Alabama, the couple of losses they have in the SEC are going to be coming against South Carolina, and I think also the other loss came to Georgia as well. So yeah, that's the other loss there for Alabama. So Alabama at 10-2. I think this team is going to be a lot better this year. It really just does come down to the quarterback position. I think for LSU as well, it really does come down to the offensive line. Defensively, I think could be a pretty big upgrade for the Tigers, and that's the reason why I'm kind of pretty high on this team is because of their defense, and they also could be a playoff team as well. So I think LSU and Alabama could be like teams that could make it to an at-large spot in the college football playoff based on their records. And I think they will have really good resumes because, LSU plays a non-conference game against Clemson, and then Alabama, they have a pretty tough schedule in the SEC. So these two teams probably should be automatically into the college football playoff. And yeah, LSU, I do got them losing to Clemson in that first game of the season. So that's where the second loss, and then one loss, of course, comes to Alabama. And then at the top, we have Texas and Georgia. So this is my SEC championship matchup prediction. Texas, though, they have a pretty easy schedule in the SEC, but I do have them losing to Georgia. That's the one loss there. That's the reason why they are at 7-1 in the conference. But I have them beating Ohio State, and that game really kind of decides what Texas is going to look like, and also what, Arch Manning's going to be like here for Texas this year as well. So yeah, Texas, I have this team going 11-1 and getting back to the SEC championship, and then same thing with Georgia. Now, Georgia, I don't feel confident that this team is going to go 12-0, but most of their big games are at home. You got Alabama at home, you got Ole Miss at home. Those are two teams that you lost to last year. And then you got Texas at home. So yeah, Georgia has a schedule that sets up pretty well for them. They got some tough games though. They got Auburn on the road, could potentially, get knocked out of, they could probably get upset in that game. And then you got also, the game against Florida and Jacksonville. That's another game they probably could get upset in. So I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia did go 10-2 again this year. I think, 11-1 is also possible, but because of how big their games are at home this year, I think that's just really tough to go against Georgia, and that's the reason why I do got this team going 12-0. But like I said, I don't feel confident with this prediction at all for the Bulldogs. So those are the standings based off of my predictions. Let's now get into my SEC championship game prediction. It's the same prediction I had from last year, Georgia and Texas in the SEC championship for 2025. Last year Georgia beat Texas twice. We know how tough it is to beat a team twice, but Georgia did that. They won the first time last year in Austin pretty easily. The second matchup was even closer, but Georgia was able to come out on top in it. And it seems like, when Georgia plays in these big games, they're just always well prepared. Kirby Smart has his team prepared, and that's just the gut feeling that Georgia has when it comes to a big game. But this Texas team, I've kind of been, pretty much, favoring them ever since the early part of the offseason in the month of January. I just feel like this team is probably the favorite in the SEC, and also the two quarterbacks here, Arch Manning and Gunnar Stockton. I got to go with the better quarterback, and that's going to be Arch Manning. I do got Georgia winning the first game, but the second game, I feel like this is Texas's year, so I'm going to say that the Longhorns do beat the Georgia Bulldogs here in the second matchup in the SEC championship, and I got Texas winning the SEC this year. So that's going to be my prediction here for the SEC championship, and those are my standings, and also all my predictions here for the SEC football teams. And give me your thoughts about these standings down in the comments below, and give me your prediction for the SEC championship as well. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.